Hey everybody, my name is Gabriel Varga. I'm a 6-time pro kickboxing world champion. You can check out some of my belts behind me. Now I want to sit down with you today and do a breakdown of one of my fights from back in 2014. It was my second fight against a fighter or an athlete from Thailand. It's always a massive honor being able to compete against an athlete from Thailand. I have so much respect for those guys. I actually trained out there for 10 weeks years and years ago. I learned so much. Muay Thai strikers, and those in particular from Thailand, are without a doubt one of the best strikers in the whole world. So I want to share with you guys today how I prepared to beat this super dangerous striking style. Because in the past, I defeated Muay Thai legend Lerdsila. Now, 2 years later, I was fighting a young and upcoming athlete from the Sitmonchai gym. This guy had an 82-21 record, way more fights than I had because at this time I was 23-2. My opponent, I believe it's Yodkanpor, or he was more commonly referred to as Moo. He was a young and upcoming fighter, a lot of fire in him, really sharp, really strong technique. At his first fight in Glory, he just rolled through his opponent with just amazing front kicks to the body, just knocking him backwards, chopping him down with the low kicks. So I'm going to share with you guys today the strategy, the breakdown that I put together to defeat this amazing athlete. Because in my experience, and I fought not just fighters from Thailand, but a lot of Muay Thai fighters from other parts of the world, if you fight their fight, you are going to lose. Most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely. If you can take them outside their comfort zone and make the kickboxing fight less Muay Thai style, you have so much better chance of winning. It's worked for me. It can work for many people out there. Now keep in mind, this whole strategy that I'm going to give you can be reversed. If you're the Muay Thai fighter, you use all your assets and really try to avoid the kickboxer getting into their zone of comfort. But today we're talking about my kickboxing style defeating a Muay Thai style. And today, guys, I want to start by talking about the front kick. The front kick that Yodkanpor had, that he could just hit people with and he'd send them literally flying onto their backs. So in my experience, when you have somebody who can just kick like a horse, like they're not just going for a little snap kick, they're coming up and pushing through, and he sent people just completely over their feet onto their back. So how do you deal with this? Because normally I would try to scoop or I'd try to catch, but in both those instances, when you try to get your hand in the way, the force is so much so that even if your arm does take off some of the block, you're going to absorb a lot of the kick, you're going to get knocked backwards, and the front kick still becomes a scoring technique. So I'm going to throw some clips up from the fight, and you're going to see time and time again when this front kick came towards me, I did not stand my ground and try to scoop it or catch it. I just rode backwards on it. And I did the same thing when I fought Lerdsila. You don't want to get heavy on your feet. You don't want to have your weight on your back foot because it's very difficult from here to move backwards quickly. If you keep your weight more 50-50 and you're light on your feet, the heels are off the ground, when somebody front kicks you or you see that front kick coming, it's so easy for you to shift backwards. And that little 6 inches to a foot that you can move back, that makes all the difference in the kick either not landing entirely or the kick just very lightly touching you and not scoring. And we drilled this a whole lot in fight camp. My partners would throw front kicks at me and I just had to stop getting used to doing what I always do, which is scoop or catch. Stop doing it. All they wanted me to do was every time the front kick came up and I saw it coming, step back. If they landed the kick on me and I wasn't fast enough, I still ride it back. The whole objective here was just to stay on my feet and make sure I didn't get knocked down, because that does not look good on the scorecards, and it's very exhausting having to get knocked down and get back up while your opponent is just relaxing. Now next, guys, I want to talk about the very high guard that we noticed that Sitmonchai had. I saw that his hands were very high like this. Now as soon as you see that somebody's hands ride up extremely high when they're dealing with head punches, the logical attack, the easiest way to make sure you land is to switch levels. So you will note so many times that I made sure I went down to the body, attack that body over and over. Obviously, you don't just want to lead in and just come with straight body shots with your chin really high. So a lot of times it's making sure that you set up first, you throw some hands up to the head and you score low, or you throw a cross down to the body, but you fade your head back very quickly. The reason most people have trouble with body shots, they don't like throwing body shots or they're not successful, is they're too scared about getting countered. And that's a legit concern, a very legit concern. If you don't want to throw a body shot and get hit to the head, you have to make sure everything is on point. So like I said, for me, a big factor was seeing those hands up high, throwing some headshots, making sure his arms were rising up even more, and then from there, finding the body shot. Or when you land, head back out of the way really darn fast. Now this is just part of my game plan for this fight, but in my experience, putting hand combos together and switching levels is very effective against somebody who has that Muay Thai style, because they're not necessarily used to throwing or having long combos with hands thrown at them. Their boxing, I would say, is a little weaker than the average high-level kickboxer. Now that's not to take anything away from Muay Thai fighters, because we have to be real about it. Muay Thai fighters have way better clinch, way better round kicks, way better front kicks. Just overall, anything from the waist down or anything really tight, they excel at. So as a kickboxer, you have to find the few small areas that you are better in, which will allow you to defeat that Muay Thai style. Now, moving on from there, I want to talk about throwing in fancy techniques to the overall sort of Dutch style game plan that I had. If you watch the fight, you're going to see many clips of me throwing things Dutch style. You know, I'll come up with the head punches, then down to the body, then with the low kick. Very Dutch style. But if I just stuck to that game plan, I feel like Sitmonchai would have had more success throwing in the fancy techniques. It alters the rhythm and adds an element of surprise and maybe makes him a little bit, just a little bit uncomfortable with the timing and the pace and just the surprises. So you will see many, many times in this fight where I bust out spinning back fists, spinning side kicks, spinning hook kicks, scissor round kicks, rainbow kicks, just throwing in a whole assortment of things that he's probably not used to training for, and which just cause a little hesitancy, a little moment of, oh, maybe I have to be a little concerned about another fancy technique getting thrown at me. And when that hesitancy sets in, you start to lose the advantage. And I gain it, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So if you're ever fighting somebody with a very effective but simple style, you know, they're standing here and they like to just go 1-2, or they have really good round kicks and they're exceptional at what they do, and you know you can't beat them in that area, why trade in that way? You want to get on your feet, you want to move around, you want to start throwing fancy things in there to throw off the rhythm, to throw off the timing, and you'll be surprised. You may even land amazing shots. It worked for me when I fought Lerdsila. You know, I busted out a spinning back fist, caught him, knocked him down. The guy's hardly ever been knocked down. How did I do it? Just a random technique that he's not used to seeing that just surprised him in the moment. So even though most of the fancy shots that I threw on Sitmonchai didn't land, things like rainbow kicks, you know, I drop the head and I come around, even though they didn't land, they're still messing up his rhythm. And if you have an arsenal of fancy techniques that you can throw in occasionally, it doesn't work for every fighter, but it'll work for the ones who are very traditional stylists and don't practice those techniques and don't have those techniques thrown at them. If you have somebody that you're competing against like that, or sparring against like that, try out these fancy techniques and you will be surprised how effective they will be. Now next I want to talk about the research that we did. And as we were conducting research on Sitmonchai, we noticed that, whoa, he's a hard puncher because he loads up on all his shots. He puts almost 100% in. He very rarely will go over a combo of 3 or 4, but when he throws, he's grinding those shots in. So my team, we knew that an important part of this fight was not to stay in that zone where he could be landing shots until the fight got further on. But initially, be very safe, be very cautious, maintain a nice distance. And that involves your ability to move out after you throw something. So a lot of times when people throw, they get their nice combo going, they land their shots or go off the guard, and then they hang out there. They guard back up, and it gives their opponent time to counter back. But if you're fighting somebody who when they throw 100% into their shots, if you can simply boom, 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 move, and then they throw the shot and they're missing because there's nothing there, that's extremely frustrating, extremely tiring. And if you ever watch the full fight of Sitmonchai versus myself, you will note that as the fight goes further and further on, he seems to fade more and more. And I believe a major contributing factor to him fading was a lot of shots missing. It is much easier to throw a punch out and have it connect and rechamber off the bounce. You know, whenever you hit something, it's like your shot kind of bounces back. But when you miss, you're, or you have to miss and then really put effort into pulling that shot back in. It may not seem like when you're shadow boxing or doing bag work or something like that, that it's that much more advantageous to hit something, but when you're tired, when you're fatiguing, it is very, very beneficial to hit something and have your shot bounce off. So me being able to move out and make him miss shots was so important. And it's something you guys should work in your shadow boxing, in your bag work. As you're striking, you then fade back and make sure you create distance. Now, next, guys, I want to talk about the jumping knee that Sitmonchai had. It was sharp. He came in so explosive, so straight with it, just boom. We drilled so much during camp. Basically every training session, every pad work session, my pad holders would just flying knee right towards me. And many times in the early stages of camp, I would just go defensive. They would jump towards me and I would just go, huh! But standing here, even if you get the block off, with the amount of force that Sitmonchai threw into those knees, there's a chance the knee's gonna get through, and even if it doesn't, it could land in my chest, it could start banging up the forearms. So my pad holders just kept throwing this flying knee at me, throwing and throwing and throwing, and they were just waiting for me to start clicking on our game plan, which was to take our back leg and angle off. Just a tiny little pivot, and as I pivot, my body now turns sideways and the knee passes through. And at least 2 times in this fight, this technique worked perfectly. And just as we said earlier, it's much easier to throw a technique and land than to miss. Missing is so much more exhausting, and just mentally, it's just so frustrating to throw something and have nobody there. So again, this is a very simple technique. I take my back leg, I pivot off about 45 degrees, and then as I do that, my shoulders parallel up, and my body has created a space for somebody who's jumping to pass through without me taking any impact. My hands obviously stayed up because I don't want to drop and have, somebody fake and throw across. So it's hands up, they come towards me, tight guard, just angle. It was such a simple little angle, but it was so beneficial. It can work on flying knees, it can work on big front kicks. People have to commit to follow through on you, and you just take that lovely little angle and just give them nothing to hit. Now, one of my favorite things to do when I am breaking down an opponent is to find things that they do time and time again that they are successful with, and then drill and drill and drill to make sure they will never land it on me. And something that we saw Sitmonchai do time and time again was come from the low kick and then into the cross. Low kick to the cross. Because he had such a good low kick, I guess many times when he'd start landing it, he'd start chopping people, they'd start dropping their hand, maybe trying to get the checkup, and he was able to hit and then land that cross. And like we already said, he had heavy hands. So I made sure in this fight that I either took the low kick and kept my hands up, or I check and kept my hands up, so that when the time came that he actually threw this technique, I was completely safe. My hands never left my head. When you find somebody who has maybe 2 or 3 signature techniques that they love throwing, drill it time and time and time again defensively, so there's no way they can land it. When you take away somebody's signature technique, it's so easy for them to get frustrated, and so easy mentally for them to start breaking down and thinking maybe, oh, I can't win this fight. I can't even land my favorite techniques. That's just my take personally on creating a good game plan for your opponent. And finally, guys, the last thing I want to break down about my fight against Sitmonchai, part of my game plan was to do our best to keep him defensive. Now that is easier said than done for any opponent, because people are coming out, they want to knock you out, they want to win. But you will note in round number 1, he was not overly defensive. Round number 2, he started to fade back a little bit, and I was able to become the aggressor. He was much more defensive. Round number 3, he was becoming super defensive. Now that could be because exhaustion, maybe he was tired. It could be because, as we already talked about, my game plan was working very well, and he was just getting very frustrated at not being able to land. And when you're not landing, you stop throwing and you become defensive. But if you look at these clips of me landing these shots and him being so defensive, it's taking the whole game plan that we've already talked about into account, all the little details, which ultimately led to what we were aiming for. Let's make this Thai fighter go defensive. Let's not let him pressure forward. Let's not let him be the person who dictates the pace of the fight. I'm going to dictate the pace of the fight. And when we get to that point, when I'm the one controlling the pace of the fight, now we're not doing Muay Thai pace anymore. It's a kickboxing fight. Even though it's already kickboxing rules, it's so easy for kickboxers. I've seen it time and time again. People fight Lerdsila. People fight Sanchai, and they fall into their rhythm. The guys are like this, and their opponents who would normally be bouncing, they fall into the same rhythm. Figure out what your rhythm is. Keep the fight at your rhythm. For me, I wanted to be the aggressor, and I wanted Sitmonchai on the defense. It took 3 rounds until we got to where we wanted to be, but in that 3rd round, it was domination. And I love sharing these videos with you guys because it's so key to me in my fight camp to come up with a game plan. I'm not somebody who likes to just go, oh, who are we fighting? Okay, that's his name. Okay, I'm just going to do my camp. No. As soon as I find out who I'm fighting, I am researching, watching their fights, every couple days, every training session, drilling in what they're good at, what they might not be good at that I could exploit with my offense. It's smart fighting. It's tactical fighting and not just coming in just trying to, windmill my arms and try and land a lucky shot. Everything I land, everything I throw, everything I work defensively is calculated and prepared for. And I believe the best fighters in the world, in particular the ones that really shine, Giorgio Petrosian, Floyd Mayweather, George St. Pierre, those three guys in those three disciplines are so exceptional because they have exceptional game plans and because they study their opponents and they know exactly what they have to prepare for and how they're going to defeat them. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that breakdown, a look into how I prepare for my opponents, how in particular I prepared for Sitmonchai. I have loads of content on my channel. If you guys want to check it out, please be sure to come on over. I've got many more breakdowns. I have workout videos, I have tutorials, I have breakdowns of other fighters and what sort of training tips you can use to be more like them. I really hope to see you guys over at the channel. Drop by, throw down a comment, let me know you're there, say hi. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I hope you got some knowledge here. I hope you got some wisdom or insight out of this breakdown. Big thanks to the Muay Thai guy, Sean, for having me on his channel. It's an honor to be here to be able to talk with everybody and share some of the knowledge that I've gained throughout the years. Guys, train hard, and I hope to see you over at my channel very soon.